Well, good evening. Hopefully you had a good day at school today. I know I did. We are going to be going over sections 110, which are equations and functions. So what I want you to do first is go ahead and copy this information down into your notes. So go ahead and hit pause, and then we'll come back and discuss. So go ahead and do that. Alright, a function. Okay, a function is a relationship that assigns exactly one output value to one input value. And I know that when you read that definition, you're thinking, okay, what in the world does that mean? Well, let's talk about this next part, and then we'll try to put things together and have a better understanding. The function rule is the operation performed to the input to get the answer to the output. So we have two things. One is an input, and the other thing is the output. Okay? The function rule is what takes place from the time we put it into it to when it comes out. So it's kind of like a machine. We've got the input, and it's going to go into that machine, and it's going to do all kinds of different things inside, and it's going to do whatever the rule is telling it to do, and then the final product will be that output. Okay, for example, I've had a couple different ways of explaining it. One would be like a meat grinder. I had a student a few years ago that their father owned a meat market, and so they discussed how they would take that large solid piece of meat and put it into that grinder, and it would grind it all up, and then what would come out the other end of that grinder would be hamburger. Okay, and that hamburger was the output, and the rule was all the grinding that took place and crumbling of all the hamburger or the meat into make the hamburger. Another possible analogy that you could use is like an ice dispenser that you might have in the door of your freezer at home. And when you press that button on the door that says to crush ice, that is your rule, is to crush those cubed ice, the cubes of ice. And when you put your cup up to it and you push on that button, and it makes all that grinding noise, that is the grinding up of that ice, and the output is what the crushed ice that falls into that cup. Another analogy that you could think of is some of your parents might work in a factory. A factory that comes to my mind is the GM plant. All kinds of function rules take place from the time that vehicle, those parts start to hit that assembly line, and all those people and robots that actually do the welding, and then the people that are adding the parts and so forth and bolting them to the frame of the car, and as it goes down that assembly line 24 hours later, you end up with a GMC truck at the other end that is all complete and ready to drive off the line. So there's all kinds of different function rules that took place all down that line, and the output is that final product. Okay, and that is ultimately what you are doing, but you're going to be doing it mathematically. So we're going to have some type of operation, meaning add, subtract, multiply, or divide, that's going to be performed to the input, which will be represented by x, the variable, to get the output, which is going to be actually represented by a variable y, but we'll talk more about that later as we get through this. But it will end up being the output, which will be the answer. Okay. There are two things that you need to know. One is the domain and one is the range. Domain are my input values. That is what stands for x. My range are my output values. That is what's represented by the y. Okay. So with that being said, let's take a look at the next frame, and you can see that we have an equation, and you say, well, it has two variables in it. Well, that's true. we know that y equals 20x, which is 20 times x. So y equals that. Y is going to be my range. As we look back at this, remember range is my output. So my range is over here, and my domain is going to be my x. And we need to do something with these numbers. Well, they gave you the numbers. Okay, x stands for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and this is my function table. And this is the rule itself. This is what we're going to do to it. So we're going to take 20 times whatever x is, which is 1, and my output, the y, which is also the range, is going to be 20. And then we're going to take 20 times whatever the x is, which is 2, and we get 40 for my output. I want you to go ahead and finish that out. So if you want to hit pause, you can finish this. Alright, so then you ended up with 20 times 3, which is going to be 60, and then we have 20 times 4, which is 80, and then 20 times 5, which is 100. Okay? And that is the answer to this. That is the function table that we're working with. You again have the rule that is given to you, and then we are trying to find the range. Okay? Now this x and this y, to kind of take a little further, remember you have the coordinate plane. Okay? And this is my x, this is my y-axis, and we would actually graph this, and we would say 1, so we go over 1, up 20, we'll pretend 20 is here. Actually, we will not say 20 is there, we're going to pretend 20 is down here actually. And then we're going to say 2, and then the next one is 40, and then 3, and 60, and 4 is 80, and then the 5 to be the 100, and then you would draw a line through this, and that actually gives us our slope of our line. So that's kind of where we're going to eventually be going with this with our functions, because with the x we can get the y and then create finding the slope on the coordinate plane itself. So this is not something you're going to do today. It's kind of going over a little over and beyond, but that's kind of what this class is about, taking it a little bit of a step further, and we will be getting into this. There's an actual chapter dealing with that, with the slope. What I want you to do is go ahead and solve this for y equals x minus 1 and 5/10. So go ahead and do that. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and plug this in, and we get 2 minus 1 and 5/10, which leaves us with 5/10. And then we get 3 minus 1 and 5/10, that is a subtraction, and so we get 1 and 5/10. And then 4 minus 1 and 5/10, which gives us 2 and 5/10. Okay, and then we go to 5 minus 1 and 5/10, which then is going to leave us 3 and 5/10. And then 6 minus 1 and 5/10, subtract that and you get 4 and 5/10. And then you notice that we have decimal point values in here, and yes, they can be certainly decimals. Even on the coordinate plane there can be decimal points. It does not have to be whole numbers. We can estimate between those, if this were 1 and this were 2, obviously this is my 0.5, and that would actually be going up the y-axis. So we would go over the 2, up 0.5, which would put it actually about right here, and so on. Okay, so if you have any further questions, I think it's pretty straightforward. It's not real difficult. Obviously, will be some different types of problems on your homework that'll test you a little bit as far as some decimals and fractions and so forth. But as a whole, it's pretty straightforward. There are going to be a few different problems that might ask you to find the actual function rule itself, by them giving you the x and them giving you the y, so the domain and the range, and then you have to find the actual value here. That is something we'll do down the road as well. So lots of different stuff that we have looking forward to ahead of us, but this is the first step in getting to that point. So again, if you have questions, please make note of that, and we'll discuss them further tomorrow. Other than that, have a great evening.